fresh batteries.
All right. Oh, need a Bible. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, welcome everybody to Bible study. Glad you're all here. And a few preliminary things as we get started. First, this is for the people watching online. You saw the installation date, as I was given it by Ron Klewitter, for the new building was March 29th, a Tuesday. It'll take certainly a few more weeks or some period of time to get into it, to get the concrete poured and all that, but eventually we'll have the opportunity to be down in the basement. So for the people online, yes, Lance.
I talked to Ron.
Yeah?
He said the 4th of April.
4th of April. Okay. That's what happens when you give a date. That's a good idea. Wait till spring break. I mean, that if it's only 1 week later and there's no kids on campus, that does make sense. All right, so 4th of April. In any case, eventually we'll be down in the basement, so we need to start thinking about having Bible study down there. But the one, not hiccup, but the issue we'll have to think through is how are we going to record the services? It always shows there's 10 or so views, people watching, so we thank people for watching. Hope you're enjoying it. We've tried to improve the quality by passing the microphone around and stuff like that. If you are watching, if you could do me a favor and make a comment or like or something, not just like, because then we can't see who you are, but maybe comment, or if you're not logged in, let me know that you are watching and it is worth it, because we will have to do something to figure out how to have Bible class recorded. We'll probably have to figure out a way to record it downstairs with different equipment. I don't think we can move that camera. I don't think we're going to get a second camera. I don't think we're going to stay up here unless there's a tremendous outcry. So to do, I think the basement is preferred. But anyway, just putting that on everybody's horizon, and especially asking for feedback from online people, just verifying that you do watch and find it worth recording. Then the second thing, I don't know, this may not take long at all, but I thought as long as you're here, the teachers went to a teacher conference. Teachers, any interesting things to share that the congregation would appreciate hearing from that conference, or was it all technical teacher stuff that would be boring to everyone else? Okay. At least you're honest about it. Hopefully it was at least good to see the other Christians and fellow teachers from other schools across the state. All right, in that case, it's time to get into Daniel. And this will be our last week in Daniel. And then any thoughts on where we go next? We'd had some ideas thrown out. It's been a while. We could look at a New Testament book. I'm hoping to do more of a topic and something with a lot more discussion. I keep postponing that till we get downstairs. Maybe I shouldn't, because you never know how long that'll be. Any thoughts on what would be a good next topic? Anything burning in your mind? Hebrews has been suggested. Okay, other people like Hebrews. Hebrews is a good. I mean, what book isn't good in the Bible, right? You can't say any book is bad, but I'm thinking, is it a change from this book? It is a change. It's a harder book to interpret in some ways. You have to go slower because there's a lot of references to the Old Testament, so you kind of have to look them up. But at the same time, there's a lot of natural built-in application questions. So, okay, that's a good. Any other thoughts? Hebrews is probably a good one, and that is a book that I would never want to preach through in a sermon-type format because it would be too complicated, too many details. So that's a good one for Bible study. And it's not as complicated as what we got in Daniel 11 today. But what we're going to do, you'll notice there's 3 chapters left in Daniel, 10, 11, and 12. We're going to look at chapters 10 and 12. And if you want to look at 11, I brought you a special handout. And 11 is best looked at on your own time. 11 is it's not really too hard to understand. There's just too many details that you have to kind of really study Hellenistic history and then look at these details. And I've studied Daniel 11 twice in my life in great detail, once at graduate school, and then once when I was teaching in Hong Kong, and I thought I should really know this material really well. And each time, it took me hours to get through it. I mean, it's just really, and it's not because, it's just because it's prophecy about something that happened in history already, and so you have to be really familiar with that history to make sense of it. So I'm going to put the offer out there. Anyone who wants to study chapter 11 and get into all these details, you can do that. I'll even sit down and we can work on it in a small group or something. But we're just going to look at chapter 10 and 12 today, and it's actually one big vision, but it's pretty helpful because it's talking about the kingdoms of this world, and there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with this Russia-Ukraine situation. Would you agree there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we probably don't know about? Yeah, but we're not just talking about humanly speaking. We're talking about with God and the angels and the demons. And there's stuff happening behind the scenes in the spiritual world that we would never guess. And a little bit of the veil gets pulled back on just a corner of that for us to see in chapter 10. So this is a really neat chapter. I'll just read that first note because it's on the first verse. It talks about the time period when this chapter happens. In the 3rd year of Cyrus's reign, that is about 536 BC, the Jews had already returned to Israel and were in the process of rebuilding the temple. The work was going slowly because of interference from their neighbors and because of politics in the Persian court. Humanly speaking, the Jews were at everyone's mercy. The final vision addresses Daniel's worries, assures him that God is in control and working through the foreign powers to accomplish his will, and that his promises will be fulfilled. So that's what we're going to get here. And we'll now begin, but with a prayer, and we'll pray for those people who are in that accident outside as well. Heavenly Father, bless us now as we study your word. Encourage us through this vision that you gave Daniel, just as you encouraged him, and help us to grow in our trust in you and our obedience to you. We also ask that you would bless the people in the accident there, help them to heal from any injuries that may have occurred, help them to find patience and peace in this difficult time, take care of them, and use this to draw them closer to you in some way. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into it and read verses 1 through 3. Any volunteer? Thank you, Mark Redlosk. Yeah, and just be gentle with those microphones, as always. Little reminder. Not that you weren't, just reminding everybody.
In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a revelation was given to Daniel, who was called Belteshazzar. Its message was true, and it concerned a great war. The understanding of the message came to him in a vision. At that time, I, Daniel, mourned for 3 weeks. I ate no choice food, no meat or wine touched my lips, and I used no lotions at all until the 3 weeks were over.
Okay, so we don't really have any content of the dream, but why does it start this way, telling us about Daniel's reaction to the dream, or the revelation, I should say? Not really a dream.
Doesn't sound good because he's mourning.
Yeah, he's mourning it for 3 weeks, so obviously it has a heavy impact on him. How does that help us prepare for this vision? How does it affect our mindset going into it? Yeah.
You know it's not the greatest thing that's going to happen in the world because Daniel's mourning already.
Yeah. So we are kind of prepared for something heavy, something that may disturb us. Yes.
One thing that I just noticed is in the beginning of Daniel, he didn't want to eat meat or wine or anything like that.
Yeah.
And now he's eating the meat and wine.
Oh, you're right. That's a good point. Now he is eating meat. So at some point, he did begin to eat the meat that was served in Babylon. Yeah, interesting point. Yeah, hadn't thought of that before. And he's drinking wine, so he's kind of living a normal life, but not these weeks, not even using lotion. And in a dry climate like the Middle East, no lotion for 3 weeks was a bigger problem, you know. All right, so let's go on to verses 4 through 6. We'll do short little bursts here. You can keep going for a while, Mark.
On the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, the Tigris, I looked up, and there before me was a man dressed in linen, with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like topaz, his face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and his voice like a sound of a multitude.
All right, so on the bank of this river, he saw a man dressed in this kind of crazy way. Question 1 asks, who was the man who appeared to Daniel to explain the meaning of the vision? That's one option. It's an angel. Other options? Yeah, Carl? The other option is it kind of sounds like Jesus is described later. His face like lightning, his eyes like flaming torches. He's kind of glowing. His voice is like the sound of a great multitude. So those are the two options, and maybe we'll leave it at that. If it is an angel, it's quite an angel. If it is Christ, it's Christ appearing in an earthly before his incarnation. And earlier we had the angel identified as Gabriel, but he won't be identified that way here. But we'll keep reading, and that might help with the identification. Verses 7 through 9 now. We'll keep going.
I, Daniel, was the only one who saw the vision. Those who were with me did not see it, but such terror overwhelmed them that they fled and hid themselves. So I was left alone, gazing at this great vision. I had no strength left, my face turned deathly pale, and I was helpless. Then I heard him speaking. As I listened to him, I fell into a deep sleep, and my face hit to the ground.
All right, does this remind you of anything? John? Oh yeah, John in Revelation, when he first gets this vision, he has a similar reaction, kind of falls over like he's dead. Anybody else? Any other reactions it reminds you of? Paul of Tarsus, yeah, same thing, where Paul, I'm trying to remember the exact way he puts it, but I think everybody saw that there was a bright light, but only Paul heard Jesus speaking, I think, and kind of like here, only Daniel fully gets this vision, but other people around him can tell something's happening, and they're terrified, and they're falling to the ground in a deep sleep. Now, there's no word for them that means passed out, so I think sometimes when they talk about they fell into a deep sleep or it was like they were dead, it's basically saying they passed out. All right, and it says, question 2, what was Daniel's reaction to being in the presence of the Lord? Just describe that. What lesson can we learn from that today? Let's read the next 2 verses and then discuss that. So, Mark, maybe one more section, if you can take it. 10 and 11.
A hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. He said, Daniel, You who are highly esteemed, consider carefully the words I am about to speak to you, and stand up, for I have now been sent to you." And when he said this to me, I stood up trembling.
Yeah. So he's obviously terrified and trembling. What lesson can we learn from that today about his reaction to being in the presence of the Lord? Be reverent in the presence of the Lord? Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts? What can we learn?
You have to be on his knees and not look at him, if you're to see God himself. It's like you would die. He could stand up and be there.
Yeah. So even though it is natural for us to fall down in God's presence, God raises him up. He lifts us up in his presence. He honors us. So there's what we deserve, and then there's what God grants us, and they're two different things. By nature, God's holiness is terrifying, and yet he sustains us in the presence of his holiness. That's why it's so neat to sing the Holy, Holy, Holy right before we have communion, as a reminder of the holy God that is now bringing us into his presence, kind of lifting us up and blessing us. Carl?
Well, I was looking at verse 11, and I was wondering if perhaps it is more like an angel, because it says, "For I have now been sent to you." If this is Jesus, I don't know if it would be speaking about being sent.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. We'll keep looking at that, but that's one detail that makes you think, is it Jesus or is it an angel? It's just not, you'd think it would say real clearly, but it wasn't that important for this person to identify themselves. All right, let's get a new reader and move on to 12 through 14. You want to pass the mic? Oh, okay. Derek's already got it. Derek, 12 to 14.
12 to 14. Then he continued.
Whoa, good. Hey, great.
Do not be afraid, Daniel, since the first day that you set your mind to gain understanding and to humble yourself before your God. Your words were heard, and I have come to respond to them. But the prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief priests, came to help me, because I was detained there with the king of Persia. Now I have come to explain to you what will happen to your people in the future, for the vision concerns a time yet to come.
Okay, good. So let's look at the details here. What happened to this? We'll call him an angel now, although holding out the possibility maybe it's describing Jesus. Well, let's see. This angel was on a mission to Daniel. But what held him up? First of all, in verse 13. Yeah, the prince of the Persian kingdom. Well, who could that be referring to? Is it the son of the king there in Persia holding up this spiritual being? It seems like something in the spiritual realm, and the way we'd put it would be something demonic because it's on the bad side of the spiritual realm. Yeah. Satan's called the prince of the air, the prince of this world. So there's some sort of evil spiritual being associated with Persia. So the nation actually has its own evil spirit that's apparently powerful and able to interact with God's angels and even hold them up. And then what was required for him to overcome and get over to Daniel? Yeah. Yeah, so then Michael shows up and helps them because he's detained, and now he shows up to give this message to Daniel. Kind of I don't know, what is your reaction to this? Any thoughts? Yeah, so there's something we wouldn't have known if it weren't revealed. And I think this might be the only time in the Bible, we talk about one angel needing help from another angel. We didn't know before that there were different levels of angels with different powers, and that sometimes they'd actually need help. They'd have to strategize. Can you think of another instance of that in the Bible or anything similar? I can think of one kind of similar thing. Or what do you got, Mark?
Kind of similar, but when the angels and Jesus came to visit Abraham, there was more than one person, so there was like, I think there were like four that went on to Sodom and Gomorrah to destroy.
Okay, yeah. So with Abraham, we've got multiple angels showing up, and they do have different tasks.
We know that, there's a place in the Bible where they would speak to somebody. I can't remember if the word legions was used. And if it is legions, you've got, soldiers and leaders.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Are you thinking of the pigs? The man that there was legions of demons driven out into the pigs, or something else? Okay.
It's somewhere in the Old Testament. We were talking about the other day.
The Lord of hosts, maybe. I don't know. Actually, if you know the word that's off, we translate it, the Lord Sabaoth is the old way you'd refer to it. Now we say the Lord of hosts, or the Lord of Almighty, it's sometimes translated. But it's a frequent way of referring to the Lord in the Old Testament, and it really means the Lord of armies, that he commands armies of angels. But you're right, that kind of implies commanders and layers of authority. The word's escaping me. Kayla? Yeah. Well, it's either a Jesus or an angel. I guess what's the one problem here? If it is Jesus, it's hard to see why he would be detained by... Yeah, why would he need help from an angel? Yeah, the usual way of taking it is as an angel, but it seems to me that this study guide is leading us to see it as Jesus, and I think I see why, because there are things that describe this angel that sound like Jesus in the book of Revelation. But that is kind of a... So I'm leaving it as an open question. It doesn't say specifically. Yes, Robin?
I don't think if Jesus was fighting with the person,
Yeah.
he was fighting and he needed somebody to come take over so that he could come and talk to them. That's how I saw it.
So someone else takes over the fight with the Prince of Persia so he can come talk to Daniel. Okay, I can see that. And was Jesus ever helped by an angel? We just read about the Garden of Gethsemane. He was. I mean, why would he need to do that at this time in this way? It would seem strange, but could he somehow open himself up to the angels working with him? Could be. Yeah, were you...
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
13, then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to haunt me. We're calling one of the chief princes an angel. We're assuming Michael is the archangel.
Yeah, I think so. And that seems fair. That's how they refer to these princes, or to these spiritual beings. They are often called... Just turn red. All right. Well, would you pass the handheld, and then I'll finish that way? Oh, dear. Now I'm going to have to embarrass myself in front of everyone to get it off. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
The mic is off.
It's off? Oh, dear. This is bad. Just look away. Look away. Ah! I can't do more than one thing at once. And I just said to be careful with the microphone. Okay. I think I did damage it. It'll still work. All right, so back to Ephesians 6. The Ephesians 6:12, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces in the heavenly realms. And so the demons, and we call them demons, but in the Bible they're often called many different things. Oh, thank you. And they're often referred to as kind of authorities and rulers, things like that. That he specifically says, the powers of this dark, he says the rulers. I mean, that's one of the words used. So it's not a stretch to see this as being an angel, and it makes a lot more sense than the literal, physical prince of Persia. That would be the son of the king holding everybody up. So we should keep moving here. We'll just have to leave that. There's some mystery here. We can't fully probe the depths of everything if we want to finish in a timely manner. So 15 through 17. Any volunteer? Wait, Derek, could you keep reading? Thank you. I wonder if that's fixed.
While he was saying this to me, I bowed with my face towards the ground and was speechless. Then one who looked like a man touched my lips and opened my mouth and began to speak. I said to the one standing before me, I am overcome with anguish because of the vision, my Lord, and I am helpless. How can I, your servant, talk with you, my Lord? My strength is gone, and I can hardly breathe. How far?
Well, let's keep going through 19.
Okay. Again, the one who looked like a man touched me and gave me strength. Do not be afraid, O man of highly esteemed, he said. Peace, be strong, be strong. When he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, Speak, my Lord, since you have given me strength.
All right, so now it's basically another scene where he's overwhelmed and he's being strengthened and encouraged not to be afraid. He can barely take the words, but now he's going to get the full prophecy. Any thoughts on this section? Yeah. Yes. So when he says my Lord, it's just the normal word for Lord. So that would kind of make you think an angel more so than the Lord. Yeah. But Daniel feels completely helpless, inadequate, doesn't really even want this experience to happen. Probably good for us to remember that's how we would be too, if we ever actually, in our sinful bodies that we live in now, ever actually interacted with an angel. We wouldn't, we might think, oh, that would be cool. We might think, why doesn't God let me talk to an angel or speak to us more directly? And we don't really want that. We would be horrified in the same way. We won't in heaven because we'll be purified of our sin, but God actually does protect us by hiding this spiritual world from us. Imagine what life would be like if you could see all the angels and all the demons. Well, it would be, would it be more truthful? Yeah. 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 I think seeing the angels would be cool, but I think seeing the demons would be scary. And I also think it would be overwhelming. I think we just wouldn't be able to handle it. Just like we see here, even if it would be cool, I'm thankful that we do get an insight that it's happening, but to be really aware, how many temptations that you face on a daily basis, or how many other things? There's all sorts of spiritual things going behind the scenes that you don't know, and maybe if we did know, it would be hard to focus on anything else. I don't know. But in any case, he doesn't let us know. He only gives us glimpses. Yeah.
That my stance and posture with God is different because of Jesus.
Yeah.
And God actually does see me right now.
Yeah.
And that's clean and perfect. So isn't it true that my approach to God is going to be a little different than Daniel's because he didn't have Jesus? He didn't have the Spirit. He didn't have the status there.
Well, Jesus hadn't come yet. That's true.
And we can talk to God.
Yeah.
With our prayers and stuff because of this.
Well, Daniel could talk to him directly too, but I think the issue is that we still have sinful bodies. So our sinful nature would still be overwhelmed. Even though we know that we can approach Jesus. Think about the Apostle John, right? Because he had the same experience even though he was Jesus' apostle and he'd been with him for years. Yet when he saw him appear in all his brilliance, yeah, same thing. So, but at the same point, we aren't exactly in the same situation. Let's finish this chapter 20 through, and then chapter 11, verse 1. And this is really all just prelude to this incredibly detailed prophecy that follows. Would you want to finish it off there, Derek?
As well. So he said, "Do you know why I have come to you? Soon I will return to fight against the prince of Persia, and when I go, the prince of Greece will come. But first I will tell you what is written in the book of truth. No one supports me against them except Michael, your prince. And in the first year of Darius the Mede, I took my stand to support and protect him."
All right, and so now he's going to tell him about fighting the prince of Persia and the prince of Greece. What is so revealing about these brief terms? Yeah. So kingdoms have their own princes, and the rise of kingdoms in this world is related to spirits. When you study history, that's probably the last thing you ever think. That question, or got answered, that the rise of this nation or that nation has to do with angels fighting and being given dominance. And yet that's the picture that we're given behind the scenes. So when you read about history in the past and things that seem improbable or remarkable, or you look at today and what's going on and you think, it doesn't all add up, it doesn't all quite make sense. Maybe that's because you don't see the whole picture. And part of it is this spiritual world. It's really intriguing. Unfortunately, we don't know much more than this. But does it stir up any thoughts for anybody? Any reaction? Yeah, Derek.
For me, I mean, looking at the fact that he's talking about Greece at this point in time, I mean, at this point, they're like city-states. This is before the Battle of Marathon. I mean, wouldn't it be before that?
This is right at the heyday of the Athenian Empire, and
that would be like a prophet calling out and saying, and then we're going to have Uganda as this great nation. And I mean, it didn't exist as a nation. Quite a prophecy.
True. Now, there was a word for Greece, Hellas, in the Greek word. So they did have a word for Greece, but it wasn't a unified nation. He's right. It was a city-states with large territories at that time. So, and also the prince of Greece that ended up taking over wasn't from Greece, technically. He was from Macedon, next to Greece, but he carried the Greek spirit and culture, spread it all around the world. So that is kind of fascinating. I think the more you know about the Greeks, the more amazing this statement is. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
I think it's quite remarkable with the spiritual realm to be taught about it and to know that we can interact with it in a positive way through our prayers, and to take encouragement to pray more. In these times of troubles currently, that's something that I try to work on more, should work on more. It's important, but yet it will influence in the spiritual battles.
Yeah, really good point. When you're praying, it's going to be answered, and maybe your prayers are assisting some angel somewhere who's fighting some battle, and you had no idea that that's how it works, but that's what's actually happening. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a kind of a separate topic, but a really interesting one. Do these princes of Greece and Persia, do they manifest themselves as to the Greeks, to the Persians, as their gods? In other words, when these people worship their false gods, were they worshiping nothing, or were they actually worshiping demons that were kind of assigned to them? And if we look more broadly at Scripture, it seems, Paul says that they're worshiping demons. There's sometimes he says that other gods are nothing at all, and other times he says they think they're worshiping other gods, but they're really worshiping are demons. So these demons kind of manifest themselves in cultures in a certain way and through their false worship. It's not going into any of that detail, but it's a very interesting point, and we can kind of see it as we look at history, that every culture has its own unique set of false gods. So, what's written in the book of truth? He's about to tell him. And then, like I said, chapter 11 is, it's a great chapter. I'd encourage everybody to read it. But even for me to just review it would takes at least 2 to 3 hours to sit and really compare every detail and feel like I know what it's talking about, because it is a bit complicated. So I have 5 handouts here. You can come get them after we're done, and you can take it home, have a little study with your family. If anyone wants to meet with me, we can have a small group and go through chapter 11. We're just not going to do it now. I think it would be too tedious. And you know me, that's something. I don't shy away from tedious things, but it wouldn't work in this format. Because also it depends on your knowledge of Hellenistic and Greek history. And if you don't know that, you have to learn that simultaneously as you're learning this chapter. But it basically describes the battles back and forth between the Seleucids and the Ptolemies, these two successors of Alexander the Great, 2 Greek kingdoms that were set up, one based in Syria, one based in Egypt, and they're constantly fighting back and forth. Israel, the Holy Land, is right between these 2 nations, and so it keeps going back and forth and back and forth. And he gives Daniel this great detail about how their nation is going to be fought over by these world powers, and that would be a great encouragement for the people when they actually go through that, because they know, all right, it would feel like they had been abandoned. It would feel like God didn't care about them anymore. They were just this unimportant, nobody nation, just caught up between world powers. And this reminds them, even though that might seem to be the case, that's not how it was. They were very important in God's sight, and he had great plans for them. So you can look at that in more detail later, but for now, let's go to chapter 12, which is quite short and has a neat picture of the resurrection, actually. But it's all one vision. It's continuing the same vision from chapter 10, and now wrapping it up with a picture of the end times. So verses 1 through 4. Anybody want to switch? Mark Galkey, thank you.
At that time, Michael, the great prince who protects your people, will arise. There will be a time of distress, such as has not happened from the beginning of the nations until then. But at that time, your people, every one whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, roll up and seal the words of the scroll until the time of the end. Many will go here and there to increase knowledge.
Yeah, okay, and actually, let's stop there. So we get this great picture of the end times, and we'll just skip there. It says, discussion question 2, what will happen on the final judgment day? Yeah, a resurrection, and a very detailed description of it. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake. Is there any way to take that other than a great resurrection at the end of times? I don't think so. It's pretty straightforward. Sometimes people say the Old Testament doesn't teach a resurrection, and, well, that's not true, but there's some truth to it that it doesn't speak about it often. It does often talk about when you die, you go to be with the Lord, but it doesn't often talk about the physical resurrection of your body. But this is one of those passages that does talk about it, and in very clear ways. Some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. What else does it tell us about the judgment day and, I suppose, post-judgment day, living on for eternity? Any other neat details that you see? Yeah. will be shining like the brightness of the heavens. So the light that God has will be reflecting. We'll be living in beauty and righteousness and holiness. Yeah, forever, for all time. It's a really great picture. But what will people have to go through before that? Yeah. Verse 1, a time of great distress as has not happened from the beginning of nations until then. So this all fits with the way Jesus describes the end of the world. The Bible's always, when it talks about the end, it talks about there's a really bad period, and then the end comes. People fall away, believers are persecuted, so we can't act surprised when that happens. We can we can go to God and ask for help and strength, but we really should stop acting surprised every time we see wickedness, as though we should expect anything else from this wicked world. And especially knowing that we live 2,000 years after Jesus, the end could come any time. All right, so everyone will be raised to life. Any other neat details about the end? We also get a good picture in verse 4. What is Daniel to do with the words of this scroll? Yeah, right. So he's supposed to seal it up and then bring it out at the time of the end. But yet it's not sealed up until the very last day, but it was sealed up for a while. I think this book would not have, the stories about Daniel and his friends, anybody could have benefited from that and learned from that. But some of these prophecies wouldn't have been that helpful for the generation right after Daniel, or even 100 years after Daniel. They would have read this and thought, what is this talking about? Who are these four kingdoms? Because they're still, remember we've seen there's four kingdoms, Babylon, Persian, Greece, and Rome, and they spent 300 years in the Persian kingdom. So for that whole period, they're kind of waiting, not 300, let's see, from 540 to 330 BC. So about 210 years they spent under the Persians. So during that time, I guess it would have helped them to say, okay, well, eventually there's going to be another kingdom, but it wouldn't have been as pertinent. But as soon as there is a new kingdom, as soon as the Greeks come in and start taking over, and somebody says, hey, wait a minute, didn't Daniel talk about another kingdom? And they get out the scroll and they start reading it. All of a sudden, it takes on an entirely new life. And that's how the Old Testament is, much of the prophecy in it. Also for us, after Jesus does all these things, and the disciples say, oh, wait a minute, that's what that was referring to. So some of these things are actually written more for later generations than for the contemporaries. But why would God do that? Why would he have someone 300 years earlier write a book that's primarily aimed for 300 years later? Why not just wait and have it written at the proper time? To show the knowledge of... Okay. Yeah, so that's one thing. So they kind of know what to expect? Yeah. Well, yeah, so he's giving them a warning, and he's showing his power, because when you read this, and just like us, if you read Isaiah 53, and it talks about somebody being stricken like a lamb, he was pierced for their transgressions, he was crushed for their iniquities. You read Psalm 22, talks about a guy having his hands and feet pierced while he's publicly on display. And then you think that's written 700 years before Jesus? It has a lot more power than if it was written after the fact. So sometimes people dismiss prophecy and they think that couldn't have happened, or what would be the purpose? But it's actually very powerful when you read something written ahead of time and it matches perfectly what happens 3 years later. And it's so specific, especially if you look at Daniel 11. It's very specific. It's not like a vague, a ruler will come and will do great things, like Nostradamus, that you can apply it to anything. It's a very specific prophecy. All right, so then let's keep going and finish up the chapter. Now we're going to get some questions about how long it's going to be fulfilled. Until then, so verses 5 through 7. I guess we're still on Mark Galkey.
Then I, Daniel, looked, and there before me stood two others, one on this bank of the river and one on the opposite bank. One of them said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, how long will it be before these astonishing things are fulfilled? The man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, lifted his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time, times, and a half a time, when the power of the holy people has been finally broken, all these things will be completed.
Yeah, when the power of the holy people has been finally broken. Question 3 there, it says, can you think of something Jesus said that corresponds to this? Yeah, Matthew 24, any specific things he said would happen in the end times? You could turn there if you like. Yeah. Okay, so there's all those kind of things. There's the famines, the earthquakes, the wars. Yep. Mark?
Sure, I'm not sure, but the usually holy people are considered on the good side. So why do we want the holy people to be broken?
Well, I don't know that we want them to be broken, but that's going to happen. I'll read you what Jesus says in Matthew 24, verse 9. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. That sounds like the holy people being broken, you know? I mean, that they're decimated, following false teachings, turning away from the faith, persecuted. That's what we should expect. So again, when you see something else happen, or when you see it happening, of course we don't enjoy it or like it, but we can't act surprised as Christians. This is what we should expect from the world. If we expect something different, our expectations were wrong. So yeah, it's similar to what Jesus says. And shouldn't surprise us, right? It's God's word. He inspired it all. Jesus didn't really teach anything new. He just taught the same things with more clarity and pointedness than before. Now, verses 8 through 10. We should handle this one question at a time. Mark, if you don't mind.
I heard, but I did not understand. So I asked, my Lord, what will the outcome of all this be? He replied, go your way, Daniel, because the words are rolled up and sealed until the time of the end. Many will be purified, made spotless, and refined, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand.
Yeah, so don't worry about it too much. Life is going to just keep going on. There's many people who will be purified, many who will be faithful and cleansed by the Lord, many who will continue to be wicked, and they won't get it. Don't expect them to get it. Don't be worried when they don't get it. Pretty good description of just life going on till the end, just like we teach. And then I'll take the end. It's kind of wish it, if it had ended at verse 10, it would have been a very nice way to end, but you get this little mystery at the end here. From the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days. A difference of 45 days. As for you, go your way till the end. You will rest, and then at the end of the days you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. So, all right. This little mystery detail about the timing, I look at the People's Bible. It's challenging. That ends up equaling, though, they do have a note in verse 7, times, time, and half a time. This may refer to a time of great activity by the forces of evil, particularly the Antichrist. yet that time would quickly and decisively come to an end. Or these words might refer to the entire time the anti-Christian covenant breaker does his work. 3.5 years equals 190 days is roughly the same period. The 1335 days of verse 12 may signify the believers breaking through the time of the Antichrist persecution, enduring through faith until Jesus' return and entering life. These are all possibilities. It is, whenever you get to these numbers, it is somewhat speculative and mysterious. It doesn't seem to be a literal period of days. If it is, no one's ever figured out what that is. But it seems to be there's a certain set period of time, and there's a brief period of very intense, difficult time. But the main point we can all appreciate, no matter what, blessed is the one who perseveres to the end. Whatever persecution God's people go through is of limited duration, and God has already decided exactly how long it will take. So you don't have to worry. That's good for you and me. We got a lot of uncertainty in the world, in the news. God knows exactly how it's going to end. He won't let it go on a day longer than it's supposed to, and he will preserve his people in the meantime. That is not something we have to wonder about. That is something we know. All right, well, we'll end, and next week we'll get to Hebrews, and I think I'm going to start having more discussion amongst the group. If I wait for the basement to be ready, who knows how long we'll be waiting. So be ready to kind of turn backward, maybe do your stretches and stuff before you get here, and we'll go to Hebrews next week. Okay.